Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, this is Alan Eisenberg with another episode of Healthy You. I'm really excited about today's episode because it's my new favorite subject. As you know, just more recently in my life, really in my midlife, I've discovered that I'm really highly sensitive, and that's what's been a big driving force behind the way that I feel and the way I act and all of these things that I now understand a lot better. So I'm excited to have my guest today, which is Preston Ni. He's a professor, coach, trainer, and course designer in the area of interpersonal effectiveness, professional communication, cross-cultural understanding, and organizational change. Preston is also the author of Are You Highly Sensitive? How to Gain Immunity, Peace, and Self-Mastery, and How to Communicate Effectively and Handle Difficult People. Welcome to the show, Preston.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for letting me to be on your program.
Well, I just love the subject, and I found you in the article you wrote. I love the article you wrote. So tell me how you got into looking into high sensitivity. How did that become a subject matter that you like to work on?
Well, that's a good question. I think over the past 25 plus years, as a college classroom teacher, as a coach, as a consultant and trainer, I've worked with many people, and we know from studies that anywhere from 20 to 30% of the population may be highly sensitive in one way or another. So this is a big topic for many people. So when you mention, Alan, that you're highly sensitive, you're hardly alone. We may have particular ways of being highly sensitive, which we can talk about today. Mm-hmm. Different people have different types of sensitivity, but it's really something that a large percentage of the population share in terms of experience, in terms of challenge, as well as opportunity, if you know what to do about your high sensitivity.
That's just so true. And it's best to start off by defining it. Like, how do you define high sensitivity or highly sensitive?
Right. Well, we can define high sensitivity as internal stimulus as well as external stimulus, which can trigger a response. Many people who talk about high sensitivity tend to focus on the negative aspects of sensitivity, negative thoughts and emotions, which is very valid. At the same time, I also want to emphasize that for highly sensitive people, if you learn to manage your sensitivity, there are many positive aspects of high sensitivity that you can utilize for your benefit and for others' benefit. Intuition, creativity, the ability to be empathetic, to be good listeners, to perceive things in a way that's more acute than other people are able to. These are all strengths for highly sensitive people. At the same time, there are clear challenges for many highly sensitive people, and a big part of the challenge and the opportunity is to learn how to manage your high sensitivity.
Yeah, that's exactly on point with what happened to me, and I think it's probably harder when you're smaller, when you're younger, to realize that's what's going on, because I do think that it starts off as sort of this negativity, like, why am I feeling this way? There's an aloneness to it. You talked about the 20-25%, and I think people are probably still amazed by that, but I think we still have so much to learn about ourselves. I mean, here I am, getting ready to turn 50, and I just sort of realized through reading articles and understanding sort of past behavior patterns that I was highly sensitive. And it came out through music that I heard, through emotions that I felt. And I know, the show, I also study bullying because it happened to me. And I believe it happened to me for a lot of the reasons around being highly sensitive. But that, there are so many good things, not the least of which is empathy, which we just need so much more of. So I know there's kind of different types of being highly sensitive. What does that mean? What kind of types are there?
So, in general, in my book, we identify high sensitivity in three major categories. The first category is sensitivity that occurs within ourselves internally. Even if we stay at home with no one else around, sometimes automatic negative thoughts or emotions just occur for any number of reasons. So, for instance, if a person wakes up in the morning, looks in the mirror, and thinks, "Gee, I'm hideous," that's a form of negative high sensitivity. If a person goes to work and has negative expectations as to what's going to happen today, nothing has occurred yet, but he or she thinks, "Okay, I'm going to do a presentation today, I'm going to go to a meeting today, but it's not going to work out, I'm not going to get what I want." So those are automatic negative thoughts and feelings, which causes a highly sensitive person to beat him or herself up. And these are examples of internal high sensitivity. There's no trigger on the outside at that moment, but because of social conditioning, because of even how the brain functions, sometimes we automatically go into the negative when there's no evidence or when there's no stimulus around us to cause that to happen. So the first type of sensitivity, high sensitivity, is internal. We trigger it ourselves and we beat ourselves up in any number of ways because of it. The second major category of high sensitivity has to do with your interactions with people, our interactions with people on a day-to-day basis. And this can range from somebody cutting you off in traffic and you think negative, or at work you send an email to someone and that person hasn't gotten back to you and you automatically assume the negative. So most of us interact with a variety of people on a day-to-day basis. And for highly sensitive people, it's easy to sometimes take things personally, to jump to negative conclusions, to worry about whether or not you're going to be liked or accepted, etc. So this would be the second major category of high sensitivity. Now, in my book, I also identify a third major category, which has to do with environmental factors. Many highly sensitive people are extra alert or more likely to be triggered by factors such as bright light, loud noise, sudden surprises, negative surprises. Even people looking at you in the eye could be a source of discomfort for highly sensitive people. Many highly sensitive people are also very aware of media stimulation, not always in a good way. So you watch the evening news and it's all bad news. It makes you feel bad, or especially social media. Multiple studies have revealed how social media can have a negative impact on people's lives. Not everyone's lives, but a significant percent of social media users experience negativity, depression, jealousy, anger, irritation, etc. So environment, social influences, as well as our internal triggers are the three major categories of high sensitivity.
Wow, you just blew me out of the water with that. As I said, I would have easily been classified by many as a negative person, a self-doubter, a self-loather, all of these things. And interestingly, in relationships in particular, like, trying to have a relationship with a significant other was really difficult. Still is. I've been married 25 years. It's not getting any easier. And I find myself, I think part of that, what you were talking about is, that predictive nature. And for me, I think it's always come out that I talk about empathic ability, sort of not the Star Trek empathic, like you're reading minds, but you're reading emotions, or you're reading vibes, whatever you want to call it, off of other people, and that's affecting you. So, like, certainly when I'm in a crowded room, I get overwhelmed super easy. Do you find that to be as well another part?
Yeah, that certainly would be an example of environmental high sensitivity, where you're not always comfortable with large crowds or people that you're not familiar with in a group situation. So absolutely, this is hardly unique for highly sensitive people. back in graduate school, I had a friend whom I noticed I would have very lively conversations with her whenever we were alone or on the phone or at the end of the day in relatively comfortably lit places like at a cafeteria, a coffee shop. But whenever we would go out with a group or when we would go into a noisy environment or when we go into a bar and restaurant, she would clam up. So over time, I realized that she was highly sensitive to certain types of environmental stimulation, and knowing that helped me arrange my social interactions with her in a way to encourage really positive and open communication with her. So I would avoid bars, for example. We would tend to have more nice and quiet conversations, in more private settings. We would go out for walks if we really wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk without even having to look at each other. So knowing our own sensitivities, knowing the sensitivities of people who are around us, because they do represent up to 30% of the population, can really help improve communication and relationships. And this is true at work as well as in our personal lives.
And I wrote just a small article about sort of being a highly sensitive male, and the response back was overwhelming in terms of men and how it's difficult to be a highly sensitive male. And what I was saying was, it's not that I don't like sports. I like having a conversation about feelings more. Like I like talking about my feelings or about letting other people talk to me about their feelings. And, that's why I became a life coach as well, so that I could actually get that, I don't know, I guess it's pleasure or just that empathic feeling that is a positive one. Have you sensed that, that it's very difficult for men in particular to deal with high sensitivity?
I think quite so, particularly in our culture. I want to really make a strong point here in saying that for both women and men, the best way to be successful in life, developmentally, psychologically, is to have a nice balance where you can be assertive and strong when necessary and empathetic and thoughtful and sensitive when needed. And well-rounded development is someone who is able to traverse or navigate back and forth. In our American society, there's less permission for men to be sensitive. This has changed a little bit over the past 50 years or so, but there's still a lot of stereotypes and prejudices about how a man should be in the kind of the rough and rugged, I don't feel anything and I have to go out and conquer. Those are stereotypes about men that are not always true, and it's a detriment, it's a disservice for both men and women because men are sensitive. It's just that in our society, men tend not to have too much permission to be sensitive. Boys are typically encouraged not to cry. Boys crying is a sign of weakness. Girls crying is, it's nothing wrong with that. And so we learn, we're very conditioned from a young age to behave in a certain way. We have permission to have certain characteristics come out more. We have less permission to have other characteristics come out. I teach a gender communication course at the college where I teach full time, and in the gender communication course, we really emphasize the difference between male and female versus masculinity and femininity. Mm-hmm. And whether you are a man or a woman, and whatever your sexual orientation is, it's healthy for each of us to have a strong masculine side as well as a strong feminine side. And this is the case whether you are biologically a male or female, or whatever your orientation is. It just makes life more effective, and it liberates you have the ability to liberate yourself if you can navigate back and forth between being strong when needed and being empathetic and vulnerable and sensitive when necessary.
And I really think that's the key to learning empathy. One of the other things that I think is fascinating is that empathy, at least to me or my understanding, is it's really a learned behavior. It's not a natural. Natural is sympathy, and sympathy is very different than empathy. And so what I found was, in life, I've always had this more empathic or empathetic way to deal with people than a lot of other people. But that became a difficult thing. Like I was saying, as a guy, I would be questioned about my masculinity in obvious ways, like, was I homosexual? Why am I so caught up in this feminine side, what was considered to be a feminine side? So how does that resonate?
Well, I would say that, again, our society, our culture really does a disservice about permission for men in particular to express empathetic feelings and to be empathetic of others. But it's human. I believe that it's within human nature for each of us to have the capacity to love, to want to be empathetic. Neurologically, the prefrontal cortex, the largest region, and many consider the prefrontal cortex the most evolved part of the brain, is responsible for, among other functions, the ability to be empathetic. So empathy is really an advanced form of humanity. And if we consider some of the most admired men in the course of human history, these are men who exemplify love and empathy and humanity. So the historical Christ with his message of loving thy neighbor, the historical Buddha with his message of compassion and having wisdom about the human suffering. So it's interesting that we don't have particular barriers in our society against males being empathetic, and at the same time, people around the world, including in our own society, look up to role models, look up to historical figures who are highly empathetic, who are highly loving. So I would say that almost all men have the capacity to be loving and empathetic, and it's actually a source of strength, not a source of weakness. The world is better when we have more empathetic people rather than more insensitive people. It's just that there's also a lot of cultural dogma which constricts men from developing and expressing that part of themselves. Now, the key to empathy and sensitivity is to know how to manage them effectively so that when it comes out, when you use it to relate to others, it comes out as a source of strength. It comes out in a way that can make a difference. And this is a challenge for all highly sensitive people, which is what to do with this gift that you have that's high sensitivity. If it's not managed well, it can overwhelm you. Like water can overwhelm you in the ocean. If it's managed well, then you can sail to wherever you want in your life and have your sensitivity be there to work for you and to help you and make a difference in your life.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and we have to take a break, but one of the things I would add to that is sometimes you need to find someone, or even maybe he's listening to this podcast, but find someone to help you through the understanding that these emotions that you have and these sensitivities, there are techniques that I learned in terms of how to deal with them. But when we come back, Preston, I'd like to talk about how someone can recognize that they are that, and then some examples of the three different areas of high sensitivity. So if you'll stay with me, we'll be right back with more Healthy You.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here today with Preston Ni, and we're talking about high sensitivity or highly sensitive people. So, Preston, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, how does somebody, we know that around 20 to 25% of us are highly sensitive. How does somebody start to figure it out? Because it took me a really long time to find the information and figure it out.
Okay, that's a super question. I would say the first thing to take on is to just realize that you are highly sensitive and be okay with it. In my book, there's a checklist of the three major categories, and there are many subtypes of sensitivity on each category. So once you realize, and if you go to my blog on Psychology Today, on the website Psychology Today, you see that checklist. So anybody can access it on the internet. It's called 24 Signs of a Highly Sensitive Person. So you look at the list, or any other list that helps determine the level and the degree of a person's high sensitivity, and you simply go down the list and determine how sensitive you are, and also in which areas you may be sensitive. And once you realize that you may be a highly sensitive person, instead of feeling negative about it, instead of beating yourself up about it, simply be okay with it. And then the next step is to check with yourself, how often do you feel negative because of high sensitivity? If the stress or the anxiety that you experience is severe on a day-to-day basis, then I would say get some professional help to help deal with your high sensitivity. High sensitivity may be related to brain, as we discussed earlier. It may be related to your development. It may be related to your pathology. So seeking appropriate medical or mental health support would be very, very useful if you experience such a high degree of sensitivity that it overwhelms you, that that you're not able to function effectively on a day-to-day basis. Now, for most people who are highly sensitive, it's a form of challenge, but it's not so overwhelming that they need to seek medical attention right away or mental health attention right away. So for most highly sensitive people, the next step is to realize that you have the power as a highly sensitive person to manage your sensitivity. And you can do that by changing your thought or managing your thought, which in turn manages how you feel about many different situations in life. And you can also manage the environment that you're in, so you can place yourself in what I call home court advantage situations, where you're less likely to be triggered by high sensitivity. And being smart about how you manage your thoughts, about how you manage your emotions, and how you manage your environment can help you optimize who you are as a person and realize more of your potential. So we can be more specific about these areas, if you like.
Well, so I want to ask you a couple questions about my own self-discovery and see if you think that this is a pattern that people could think of. So the first one for me that really struck me was that I have an emotional memory. So we know there's people with photographic memories out there, right? They just remember, like they can memorize a book or something. But when I hear a song on the radio that was an 80s song, let's say, I'm actually picturing where I was, what I was doing when I heard the song, because the song brings me joy, or maybe it didn't bring me joy. And so I can play this game with people where I'm not looking at, the TV that's displaying the song, the album, the artist, and the year, and I can nail them all, or at least be within a year, because I have an emotional memory. And
Right.
it's a little parlor trick I play, but that was the thing that first struck me, is that my memory is totally emotional. It's all based in placing myself and remembering what was going on versus, I read a book and this passage stuck in my head. Is that pretty good on a trigger?
Mm-hmm. So what is your question about this, so I can answer for your listeners?
So I think it's like, what are the telltale signs? So like my telltale signs was I had an emotional memory. Music would give me goosebumps, or sometimes would make me cry. I had a kind of pseudo weird relationship with animals, in terms of animals would come up to me that someone would tell me isn't a very nice animal, and they would, you know, I believe that animals are highly sensitive by nature, but I've just had weird experiences where they come up to me where they're not going up to other people.
Right.
And then just an overall sense of like overwhelming when I'm in a crowded room, like I'm actually feeling, strangely enough, like there's lots of feelings in the room, and I'm sensing them. And also I have a very good first impression, right? So I've found over time that my first impression is usually my right impression about someone. So those were all things that kind of led me down the road. So what are those things?
All of these are good examples of somebody who is both intuitive as well as highly sensitive.
So what else could people be looking for as examples of trying to figure out if they're highly sensitive or not, or what?
Okay. So let me go ahead and answer this question by examining the three categories that we talked about earlier, one at a time. So in terms of internal high sensitivity, your listeners can ask whether or not you feel negative thoughts and emotions, even when you're alone on a regular basis. Whether or not you feel strong swellings of emotion. It can be positive or negative, and you provided some examples of that. Whether you have strong responses when you look at photographs, when you interact with animals, even when you go outside and you look at the sky, you look at the sun, you feel strongly. You feel elated or you feel anxious. It doesn't matter what the emotions are, but you tend to have rushes of emotions on a regular basis, even when you're not busy, even when you're not interacting with people or exposing yourself to media. That would be a good sign that you have strong internal sensitivity. As far as social high sensitivity, a good indicator would be whether or not you're always concerned about how other people are responding to you, whether or not they like you, whether or not they are going to be approving of you, whether or not they might reject you, whether or not what you want to say, what you want to propose at work, for example, whether it would be taken in a positive way or a negative way, is your thoughts are pretty consistently preoccupied by others' acceptance or rejection of you, or by your sense of how other people might be perceiving the way you're doing things. Those are pretty good indicators of high social sensitivity. You're extra attentive to the way people respond to you, to the way people might react to you, whether it's real or not. It's a sense of heightened awareness. In addition, as far as environmental sensitivity, I think most highly sensitive people have a pretty good idea as to the types of environmental conditions which they're not comfortable with. Again, whether it's bright light or loud noise or crowded people or watching scary movies or watching violence on TV, most highly sensitive people have a sense of what they are uncomfortable with and what they are more comfortable with. So simply by being attentive and simply by being attuned to your internal emotional ups and downs and noticing how frequently they occur is a good measurement of not just whether or not you're highly sensitive, but to which types of stimulus and triggers you're highly sensitive to.
And I would imagine, based on that the most difficult one that people deal with is the social high sensitivity. I know, to me and for me, I was easily affected by what others did around me to me. Any kind of attacks on me that were unwarranted. All of these things, which ended with low self-esteem, low self-worth, anxiety, depression, all the fun things that go along with all that. And it's really trying to figure out that authentic self. So I had to do a lot of work to find my authentic self, which is this highly sensitive and now I know extroverted, introverted person, right? And I just wrote an article, don't label people. So it's like, I don't like to wear labels either, but it took it took a major toll on me in the social area in particular, because even to this day, it doesn't take much for my wife or children to say something to me that I'll feel hurt about. So how do we manage that? How do I, what are the techniques you've learned over time in your studies, how people manage particularly those kind of things, but overall high sensitivity?
Good. That's a great question. I would say that, well, first of all, I want to make a quick comment about what you mentioned about being bullied. I read your website and I read a little bit about your background, so I'm very sorry to hear about what you had to go through when you were younger. I would say that if we believe in the idea that everything happens for a reason, and each challenge, even the most difficult ones, represent an opportunity. The fact that you went through those difficult experiences and that you're still working on it also means that you have unique perspectives to help a huge segment of the population, because you can relate to them, because you can identify what they're going through. And I would say that in this day and age, in our contemporary society, more than ever, we need people who are more empathetic, more sensitive, who have worked on themselves to help make the world a better place. So many people can relate to what it was like to be mistreated, to be bullied when they were young, but not too many people are available to help them, to be able to be empathetic, to be able to say, I was in your shoes at one point as well, and I can help you feel more comfortable. I can help you learn and grow and go to a better place in spite of what happened. So I just want to acknowledge you, Alan, for what you went through and the service that you're offering now. Because again, I think more than ever, the world needs healthy, highly sensitive people to heal, to move us toward a better place rather than a darker place. Now, to answer your question more specifically about day-to-day situations, I would say for a highly sensitive person, when something triggers you that bothers you and you find challenging, I would first of all do a real quick assessment about how important this issue is. And your response, how you manage your sensitivity, would partly depend on how significant or insignificant the event is. So if, for example, somebody cuts you off in traffic and it's annoying, well, that's probably not a very significant event, but it could be if you let it bother you and ruin the rest of your day. So some quick tips to deal with minor annoyances in life could be something as simple as saying, just say to yourself when somebody cuts you off or whatever, or you can say to yourself, I don't care. You literally brush it off and not let it bother you. And if it's still bothering you after you say those, what we call interrupters, to interrupt a negative thought, if it still bothers you, then you change your focus to something else. You play something on your radio that makes you feel good, or you focus your thought onto something that's positive. Okay, the traffic is bad right now, but you're looking forward to getting together with your friends this weekend, or you're looking forward to getting a massage this weekend. As soon as we interrupt our thoughts to change a negative thought to a positive one, our feelings begin to change, and our biology begin to change. And pretty soon, the negative thought, especially those minor annoyances in life, we tend to forget them pretty quickly unless we choose to dwell on it. So the simple tips I offered just now, interrupting your negative thoughts with interrupters such as I don't care, whatever, he must be in a hurry, she must be in a hurry, plus distracting yourself with something more positive can help take care of many, many minor annoyances. So you can just brush off the little things that bother us in life and allow them to be quickly forgotten. Now, on issues that are more than minor annoyances, such as our interactions with people, oftentimes highly sensitive people tend to interpret interactions more likely in the negative, even when there's no real evidence for that. So if you email someone with an idea at work and she hasn't gotten back to you, instead of jumping automatically to the negative, or she doesn't like my idea, or she's ignoring my message, come up with 2 or 3 interpretations of looking at the same situation. So one interpretation, which is the negative thought, is, well, she's ignoring my message, or she doesn't like it. She doesn't like my idea. A second interpretation might be, well, she could be very busy right now, and maybe she'll get back to me, when she's available. And the third interpretation is, if I really don't hear from her after today, maybe I'll stop by her office and just check in with her to see what's going on. So when we automatically presume the negative, especially in our social interactions, first of all, most of the time, people do what they do because of them more than because of us. So when we personalize on a regular basis, it's not only unhealthy, it's also inaccurate a good deal of the time. So a healthy alternative is to come up with 2 or 3 ways of looking at the same situation. And then you pick the solution, you pick the perception that is the healthiest and the most realistic. And then if you need to follow up on the situation, then you follow up with that person step by step. But in terms of interpersonal activities, a big part of reducing high sensitivity is to look at a situation from a broader perspective instead of automatically presuming the negative, which many highly sensitive people tend to do because highly sensitive people are more likely to be afraid of rejection or disapproval, etc.
And for some people, there's the other aspect, which, I think as for some of us who have gone through process and healing, realize is that there aren't always people out there who are in a good place, and they don't always take that out on others well. So you have to remember, it's really, to me, I remember it's about me. How am I treating people? How am I doing things? And I can't get caught up in the worry about how someone else is doing it. I can't change someone that is going to be, they need to realize that themselves.
Right. And again, most people do what they do more because of them than because of us.
Yeah.
So to be over preoccupied with the idea that it's all about me, or they're doing it because of me, again, it's unhealthy and unproductive.
Well, that's a great place to leave it, is really, learning to focus on the you, or what I call the authentic self. Know yourself first. That's the most important person in your life. Like I like to say, there's only one person in your life you're going to be with 365 days a year, every day, your whole life. That's you. So
that's right.
You got to like
you. Be able to. There's a great quote that I learned from one of my mentors in high school. He had it on his wall, and I forget the author's name, but the quote said, all of our troubles can be traced to the fact that we're unable to sit quietly in our room doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And to be at peace with ourselves is to be in touch really with our higher authentic self, so that we're okay with who we are, including our weaknesses, including our fallacies, including the challenges we've had in life, to be okay with that, and to know that all of us, each of us, we're each a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of being too hard on ourselves, instead of seeing life conditions as a negative, try to see life as a journey where we're on this exploration to constantly improve who we are and progressively be more and more at peace with who we are. That's kind of the journey I sense that you're on. I'm not a mind reader, but based on your website and some of the things that you've expressed to me, each of us is on this type of journey where we want to make the best of who we are. We want to heal some past wounds and pains, and we want to be of service. Hopefully, let our past experiences, especially the challenges, be a source of strength and power and benefit for ourselves and for others.
And that's a great place to leave it. I think that's exactly right. So, as we come to the end, I want to give you a chance to talk about how people can get in touch with you, get your books, your information. What are the best ways for people to reach out to you?
The best way to connect with me is to go to my website, which is nipreston.com, NIPRESTON.com, and I believe you will post this information on your website as well.
Yeah.
On my website, nipreston.com, your readers can find excerpts to over 20 ebooks, including the two topics, the two titles on high sensitivity. One is called Are You Highly Sensitive? How to Gain Immunity, Peace, and Self-Mastery. And the other one has to do with how to communicate effectively with highly sensitive people. If your listeners have any individual questions for me, they're also welcome to visit my website where they can get a hold of my contact information, email, and they can email me directly, and I'll be happy to get back to them.
That's great. Yeah, and I'll definitely have all that stuff on the website. Well, I bet we could do a whole other show about many of the other pieces of the story that we talked about, and I know you've talked about how to handle difficult people, which is another subject I'm passionate about, so maybe we'll have you back one day. But I want to thank you for being on the show today, Preston, and for sharing with us some very good, insightful ideas, and actually I learned a lot about the different types of highly sensitive beings that we are and how it affects us. So thanks so much for being on Healthy You.
Thank you, Alan. It's my pleasure.
Okay, and this is Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You. Please join us next time.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.